your body thinks that you're happy. The triggers that outside can make you happy or unhappy. And you just take on that your body can feel a certain way. But that the feeling in your body, you don't have to attach a positive or a negative to. It can just be its own thing without being happy or unhappy. Like the farmer on the horse, are you familiar with that story?
No.
The farmer finds a horse, and his neighbors come and they say, "Oh my gosh, it's so great, congratulations." And the farmer's like, "Thank you." And then this farmer's son is training the horse and he breaks his leg, and all the neighbors say, "Oh, that's so unfortunate, we're so sorry." And the farmer's like, "Thank you." And then the horse runs away and brings back another wild horse, and everybody's like, "That's so great." And the farmer's like, "Maybe." And then the army comes to take the son to go to war, but he can't go because his leg is broken. And they're like, "Oh, that's so fortunate." Well, maybe. And just that things may seem immediately to be easily categorized as positive and negative, but we have to find the humility and know that we don't always know what it will be later. So it may seem very negative, like, "Oh, your leg is broken, that sucks for sure, but now you don't have to go fight in a war, so does the broken leg actually suck when you add on all the other?"
In my own experience, the broken leg thing was the worst, most painful thing I ever experienced. I almost jokingly say that the reason my leg was broken was because of friendly fire. And that was because I was in the MI battalion and we had a softball team and we played the artillery and I was second base and I caught the ball, and instead of flipping it to our shortstop, I turned to make the tag on the runner and he slid into my leg and broke it. Very painful. But as a matter of fact, it turned out to be terrific for my career because I had a broken leg. I couldn't be the platoon sergeant anymore, so they moved me to the skiff, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's the history of my life, as I interpret all the things that at the time seemed miserable. I didn't have talent. Well, crap, I was in college to be a musician, and it turns out, what? I don't have talent? So I switched to philosophy, not knowing what philosophy was, and look at what it did for me. So every single time something miserable happened, it seemed to turn out for the best in the big picture. But that's my imagination doing that. And I'm not sure that that's going to help a paramecium trying to get fed, or the dogs get fed. I mean, we're fortunate because we're at the top of the thinking chain, so to speak, as far as we know, and as a result we can transform our interest in our own meta-narratives to kind of suit. But let me get back to Mill and Bentham. So I mean his main point in utility is that it's the greatest good of the greatest number. But as I put on my cognitive map, I put utility down where we're totally uncertain what direction is actually the best choice. What does give us the greatest happiness? In a sense, if you think about Dorian Sagan's book, gosh, all these wonderful devices and all the wonderful transportation. You can fly to Reykjavik, and then from Reykjavik you can go to Germany, and it's a nice stopover. You can enjoy yourself in the Blue Lagoon or whatever they call that. Except I think it's closed right now because of the volcano. But you get the idea. There's all these things that we could do that at the same time are beating the crap out of the environment. And so the predictions that eventually we're not going to be able to live on this earth because of all the things that we're doing, that's pretty darn scary. And especially when you have grandchildren and you're hoping that they'll have great lives. And what kind of life are they going to be able to have when you have the storms we're getting and the heat that we're getting and so on. John Stuart Mill has a fascinating life story. The way his father raised him, he on the one hand managed to end up getting a job for life with the East India Company. Didn't leave London for that. I mean, he does end up living in Avignon in France for quite a few years. But his office, in fact, they even know where his office was in the building. So if you're reading about him, you can see the window where he his office was for 30 some years that he worked as eventually the head of the department of the East India Company. But in any case, he also wrote books, and the books that he wrote, let me get back to my own notes here. I mentioned the hedonistic calculus, government reforms to help the poor. They were very much into politics, trying to change things for the better. So that it wasn't just a mysterious philosophy. They physically tried to improve things for people. By the way, a contemporary of John Stuart Mill also is Charles Dickens. And if you think about his attempts in his novels, the main like Hard Times, where he's talking about Mr. Gladgrind, who's the main character who owns a business and he tries to make everybody's life miserable so he has more money. And then at the end he discovers that even his own children end up perishing because of his miserly way of doing things. So the moral of that story is that just focusing on your wealth is a terrible way to be part of a community. I think everybody's probably familiar with A Christmas Carol, which was also written by Charles Dickens, and that has Mr. Scrooge, Ebenezer. He's visited by all the different ghosts that scare the crap out of him. So finally, at the end, he buys the big goose and gives it to the poor family that he's been making miserable, etc. So that one. So his books basically have a moral point of view that's trying to change the way the elite lives so that they share their wealth with other people and care about other people. And we'll see when we're talking about Karl Marx, who lived in London for quite a long time because no one else wanted him. The life of the miners in England were terrible for the whole family, etc. He did have a mental crisis in his 20s, which is kind of interesting. Harriet Taylor was a married woman that he met, and they became best friends and apparently did not break any rules, but once her husband died, they did get married, although she died relatively soon after they moved to Avignon. Mill's life and work, one term in Parliament. He wrote The System of Logic. And what we have with Mill and Mill's methods are really significant because, I'll talk about them as I get down here. On liberty, you can see the dates, the subjection of women. Many of his books, he said, were inspired by Harriet, but many of them that were inspired by her were also written after she had died, so I'm not sure how much of that. But so Mill's methods, focus for him was inductive reasoning, because of course the logical studies that people would have had all through the Middle Ages were all still based on the syllogistic logic of Aristotle, and that's a deductive system. Our deductive systems are fine-combed systems that enable us to know if we know this, then what follows from it. The trouble is that we never really know for sure if we know something. With inductive reasoning, the goal is in situations where you don't know something, how do you end up determining that you can at least categorize something. You know, the famous thing would be the swans are white. All swans are white. How do we know that? Well, there's a swan and it's white. There's a swan. You know, take a drive down along the Turnagain Arm, and you can see the swans at the various lakes as you go along. A couple pairs here, a couple pairs there, even at Potter Marsh, so you don't have to go far. Notice they're all white. That swan is white, that swan. You know, Aristotle famously thought if you saw 4 swans and they're white, then swans are white. Easy. But of course, there are black swans. In fact, that's the title of an interesting book. Black swans. And they're actually really black swans. Black swan theory. Okay, let's go with that. So the idea, there's a book. I don't know if it's going to refer to that book or what. But a black swan, you know, there are black swans. Obviously, our system of trying to figure out how we can categorize something is fallible. We think we saw all the things that are perfect examples of something, and so we might then conclude, aha, so therefore all swans are white. Well, guess what? There are black swans. I mean, you might want to argue, well, no, a black swan isn't a swan, it's a noir, you know, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know, Cygnus atratus different than a regular swan? I don't know. So maybe they in fact did that. But in any case, the black swan theory, in statistically unexpected events, right? You see, actually happen. Maybe not often, maybe once in a million, but it still happens. But nonetheless, when we're doing inductive reasoning, there are methods that we can use. For example, the method of agreement. Well, you know, that's a swan, it's white, that's a swan, it's white, so that it all agrees, you know. Difference. Aha, that's not a swan, and it's not white. I'm screwing this up a little bit, but you get the idea. That situation is different, and then I can combine the agreement and difference in a joint method, and that helps me even more be successful in my inductive reasoning. The one I like, this is especially fun, is concomitant variations. See it in weather, you know, the more the humidity goes up, the more likely we're going to have rain. So you get this pattern, humidity's up, rain, humidity's down, no rain, etc., etc. So you get concomitant variations. It seems like the humidity causes the rain. Replicability and controls in a laboratory. I really need to have controls over my experiments, and I have to make sure that someone else can repeat the experiment. It has to be replicable in order for us to feel like, yes, that's really what causes this. One of the more famous things was that he helped discover what caused rickets. Rickets was a real bad problem in the English cities at the time. Part of it was because they had coal as their main source of fuel, and coal is a very dirty fuel. It caused a lot of smog, and a lot of the kids, of course, that don't get out into sunshine, if they're out only in the smog, they end up getting ill, and they came to use the inductive method to discover that the problem is they're not getting enough sunshine. Lack of sunshine gives you rickets. Of course, vitamin C is, vitamin D is the other vitamin, vitamins. He's also, of course, working on utilitarian ethics. There's one supreme principle of morality: an act is right or wrong depending on the total good or evil it produces. By the way, I don't think I've mention my quiz question for today is how would a utilitarian have solved the COVID problem? I've obviously been asking this question for about 4 years now, and I've gotten some pretty interesting responses. And COVID is still with us, even though it's now considered by many to be at the level of the typical flu. But I still don't go to the symphony.
Yes, it is when I go up.
I've been listening to Taylor Swift.
Is that true? Is that a true statement, or is that?
That is true. Listen, and the oddest thing on my computer, the more times I click on Taylor Swift, the more things about Taylor Swift come up on the right-hand column. My algorithm is tended towards happiness.
No, that's a crazy cat lady. Taylor's a crazy
She's a crazy.
cat lady. Cat lady.
Oh.
You're referring to Kamala and being a cat.
Yeah.
That's a negative, which it's not. Cats are great. Ladies are
Jason
great too.
Kelsey got in trouble because he smashed a fan's phone the other day. Well, that's in the news. Well, I'll quit because it's. Any questions so far on? We'll finish up with John Stuart Mill next week. So we're already moving along. When do we have our Thanksgiving holiday? 2 weeks from now? Something like that. That's where everybody has to take off and eat dead birds. Try to make sure that they overeat so that they fall asleep at the wheel of the car on the way home. I don't know. You guys having fun? How many folks are looking forward to President Trump taking over in the White House? I think they're already building a few gulags, here and there. No, I'm just kidding.
What's a gulag?
Oh, Augusta Darseny Lager, a state camp.
Oh, for all the women.
Well, for all the enemies, put them all in a fenced-in area. Ovens over here. No, that's something that I'm just hopefully kidding. You guys having fun? Life is so darn exciting, isn't it? Can it get any better than this? This is just amazing. Pardon?
The pendulum swings really fast. Or what did you call it? Dialect.
Dialectic.
Dialectic.
Yep. It's a dialectic. The pendulum is the example of that, We're liberal, oh, conservative. We'll see you on Monday. Have a safe weekend. It's supposed to get cold on Thursday. So I think it's supposed to freeze again in like a day or two. But right now, of course, it's all wet and slippery on top of the ice. So be careful out there.